I have some questions that I want to answer. And this is not going to be a really long little Facebook Live. We are going to keep it short, sweet, and to the point. Today, I want to focus a lot on the kinds of questions I get asked when it comes to learning about iridology. So we're not going to talk about, I'm not going to teach you any iridology today, but we're going to talk about learning iridology and what's involved. So here's where we want to start. I want to start with the questions that I get asked the most often. And these are sort of the background questions of getting ready to learn iridology. So the first question is, why am I so stubborn on requiring that my students have a college level anatomy and physiology course under their belt before they come into my program? Well, that's a good question, because there's a lot of teachers out there who will take you on no matter what your background is. They'll grab your tuition and they'll do their best to teach you iridology, but they won't be able to teach it to you at a really deep level. I require anatomy and physiology because when we're looking at iris photos, when we're looking at people's eyes, we need to be able to understand how their symptoms correlate to what we see in the sclera and how that adds to the story of what we see in the iris. So when we're looking in the iris and we're looking at multiple markings that are all pointing towards the same area of concern, those markings are often not all from the same organ. So for example, if I'm working with someone where we're concerned about blood sugar levels, there may be pancreas markings. There may be pigment that suggests pancreas, but we might also see what is called a lipemic diathesis. The lipemic diathesis tells us that the liver enzymes have been out of balance for some time and are messing with how the body processes carbohydrates. But the lipemic diathesis is not technically a pancreas marker. So if you don't know how the liver works with the carbs and how its important role in balancing blood sugars, then it'll make absolutely no sense as we talk about that in the context of iridology. So that is one of the key reasons why I insist on having anatomy and physiology. We want to get in there really deep to understand all the interconnectedness of everything so that we can get to the root of a problem. Okay. And so question number 2, what are you looking for in a course? Many of the courses that are out there will teach markings. They will simply and only teach markings. Now, that is a bit of a short change for you. And I say that because if you only can correlate one marking to one organ, you're not going to get the full depth of everything that you want to be getting. And so I teach more than markings. When we are working with a client, we want to again, do the interrelatedness of the markings. Okay, this is one of my clients, and a 79-year-old male. He came to me wanting to lose weight. Now, I don't do weight loss programs, not like that. I do health promotion programs. I do health balancing programs. And so when I'm looking at his eye and he says he wants to lose weight, I'm looking at the fact that his liver wants to mess with his carbs and how he processes his carbs. That could go triglycerides, cholesterol, weight, could go a lot of different directions. We've got a marking for liver, which also suggests the same kinds of things. We have markings sitting in pancreatic zones that could also then suggest issues. We also then want to be looking at stomach. How does he digest? If he's not digesting, particularly his proteins, we're going to have a really hard time losing weight. And so I want to teach, and I do teach, more than one marking means one thing. I want to teach you how the markings work together, how to think through an eye so that you can put the client's symptoms together with what you see in the iris and what you see in the sclera and come up with a really good assessment of what needs to be done. I don't teach cookie cutter programs. I teach what the markings mean, how they work with each other, and how to think through an iris assessment, right? How does that sound? Does that sound like something that you would want to have? Another thing that you want to look for in a good course is you want to look for a course that has various different ways of evaluating what you're learning. So you'll see a lot of iridology teachers will throw slides up and they'll talk through them. They'll walk you through all the different markings and how they ended up where they're going to end up. But there's rarely an opportunity, except at the very end, for you to maybe do some case studies to show that you understand what you've learned. I think that's a real weak link. I think assessments should be ongoing from the very first lesson right through till the end, from the very beginning till you're certified. I think there should be opportunities for different kinds of assessment. In every class that I teach, in every specific module, we actually spend time at the end of our class time working through an assessment. And I ask, it's not me talking through it, it's me asking my students, what do they see? How does it tie into the symptoms? What information do these marks give us about why the client is feeling what they're feeling? Every module also has a quiz. That helps you to see what you know and what you don't know. I really push my students rather to get 100% on every quiz and to do the quizzes until they get 100%. If they've done a quiz a few times and they're still not getting 100%, I'll hop into their answers and I'll see where the weak links are and I'll teach them where to find the answers and how to think through that. It's another level of evaluation for my student. I also do a lot of one-on-one interviews with my students, and I think that's really important. You'll see a lot of teachers will take on large groups, 30, 40, 50 students, especially now that it's mostly online teaching. How can that teacher possibly understand what each student needs in the learning environment? Right? That's an important one that I think is critical. And so we have scheduled into the process times when I ask the students, please schedule a one-on-one with me for us to talk about your progress, how you're feeling, where your struggles are, so I can make sure that we are meeting that student's needs. So important. Another thing that I think is really important, and this is something that I get asked a lot, will I mentor students? Do I mentor students? And my answer is absolutely yes. I mentor my students. I don't mentor students that have studied elsewhere because, quite frankly, I think it is the teacher's job to mentor their students. And so I think it's very important that a teacher mentors their students for the long term. This is exactly why I have it set up. We have 2 group mentoring sessions every month for my students and my course grads. And my students and grads are invited to come to those mentoring sessions for as long as I'm teaching. Those mentoring sessions allow my students to bring questions that they maybe have come up with as they've practiced iridology and they're finding that there's a gap somewhere for them. It's an opportunity for students to also bring cases they're working on. They might be working on a case that they're finding very challenging. Maybe they're not feeling really confident just yet. Maybe they're only halfway through their course and they need some support. So I encourage my students to come to the mentoring sessions and bring whatever questions, whatever cases they have to get support. We also have a social media group that is not on Facebook, that is only for my students and grads. That's another excellent place for my students and grads to post questions and cases. They can mentor each other a little bit, right? We've got students that have graduated a few years ago. They've got the answers. They can mentor the upcoming students. They share lots of information there that is very valuable and very helpful. So I think from my perspective, that ongoing mentoring is very critical. It's important for me to mentor my students and grads, but it's also important for my students and grads to nurture each other and to have that strong community. How does that sound to you? Does that sound like it could be a valuable learning tool? And the 5th point I want to include is that the mentoring that I offer my students all through the course and after they've certified, after they've graduated, is not limited just to iridology. I have a lot of students who already have an established business. That's great. Some of my students are just starting out and they need some coaching and some support as to how do we start a business? How do we make this fly? How do we advertise? How do we get clients? And we spend a lot of time talking about business development in the mentoring sessions. So those are some important things that I think need to be looked at when we are considering learning iridology. I also think it's really important that an iridology class not be taught as a 2 or 3 or 5 or 6 day workshop. That doesn't give students time to practice, to see where their own personal weak links are, to come up with questions, to do the practical application testing of what they've learned. And that's one of the reasons why my course takes 20 weeks. That gives you time to study, to practice, to integrate the information, tie it into things you already know. How do you use iridology if you're a herbalist? How do you use iridology if you're a nutrition coach? Maybe you're a functional nutrition or functional medicine professional. How do you use iridology? How will you know that if you do a crash course in iridology and then you go to try to apply it, right? How will you know? So much easier to begin practicing the application early on and work with it from there to find what are your questions. Today in one of my classes that I was teaching, one of my students asked, how do you integrate iridology in? So we did a mock assessment. It wasn't a practice assessment. It was, this is how I do it when I'm sitting face to face with a client and I watch them through the process. Is it the only way to do it? No, but it's the way that works well for me. Maybe it will work well for my students as well. Or maybe it will give them a really good idea of what they could do, how they would take what I do and modify it to fit what they do better. I don't have all the answers. I have many of the answers. I know a lot of things that work and a lot of things that don't work. And my students are smart. They're really good at taking what I give them and shaping it to be what they need. So I'm always happy to share anything I can that could give them further insight and give them the ability to create what they want to create using iridology. You know, when you're learning iridology, the best option is not to try to pick up a book and teach it to yourself. It's not going onto YouTube and watching a whole bunch of videos and seeing if you can teach it, because there are so many nuances. There are so many finely tuned things. There are so many sensitivities that you develop as you're learning this and being mentored in it that can't possibly be taught in a book, that can't possibly be taught in random YouTube videos. And so I strongly feel that the best way to learn iridology is with an experienced iridologist who is also an experienced teacher and who has created a program that walks you through all of those different learning opportunities and gives you the opportunity to interact in a live way, to ask questions, get questions answered, but then to also be mentored outside of class time. I wanted to share with you those key points of why you need anatomy and physiology to learn iridology well, what you want to look for in a course if you want to learn iridology at a level that is beyond a party game, if you want to learn it at a level that is a clinical application level where you can do it in session. Actually, there is one more thing I want to touch on. And that is the wrong way to do an iris assessment is to nitpick every point you see. Let me just grab another client's eyes here and show you what I mean here. Because when we do something like that, where we are nitpicking every marking we see, it opens up the opportunity for us to get lost and to literally lose our clients. Here's another one of my clients that I was just with today. In this eye, we could nitpick a lot of things. He's lymphatic. He is slightly connective tissue. He is over acid. He has the uric acid diathesis. He is hydrogenoid. He has a lipemic diathesis. He has a dark border to his nutritive zone. He has comb teeth. That dark border is going to tell us there's a compromise in the way he secretes, a genetic compromise in the way he secretes digestive acids. We see that for the most part, his collarette is somewhat constricted. And we also see that he has the tendency to have sluggish core lymphatic circulation, as well as sluggish surface lymphatic circulation. Then we can nitpick on every pocket of pigment that we see. We could nitpick absolutely every single lacuna, every rarefaction. And you can see that if we did this, if we picked on every reflexive, we would be here for a very long time. And that's not even with touching on the sclera. This is a fellow who's come into me with long COVID, and we've only had 2 appointments together now. But as I heard his symptoms of long COVID and looked at his eyes, I understood that what we needed to do is we needed to support his digestion in order to get him breaking his foods down better so he could get the nutrients out of them. And of course, we've done a little bit of dietary work, began reshaping his diet, and also have done a lot of work with some B vitamins, because as we look at further photos of his eyes, we see he has the contraction first. So we know he's going to need the Bs, but he needs a special formulation of the Bs because of some things that we see in his eyes. So in that first appointment, we did astragalus, great as an adaptogen and great for beginning to rebuild the immune. We did some liver support, a particular formulation of B vitamins, added magnesium complex, and added some hydrochloric acid. In his appointment today, we're changing things up a bit. We pulled out the astragalus and added a Chinese formula for the immune system to support all of the different elements in his body. One of his key symptoms is breathlessness on exertion. And so we've added in CoQ10. And he's also been prone to being very mucousy in his lungs first thing in the morning. And again, this is COVID from 9 months ago. And so we've introduced some N-acetylcysteine to him as well, because that helps with breaking up lung mucus, but it also very specifically helps with phase 1, phase 2 liver detox right now. And if you don't know what phase 1, phase 2 are, you maybe need to look those up. That is key anatomy physiology information. And so it was based on his eye photos and understanding that we've got a lot of liver predisposition and a lot of digestive predisposition, along with some adrenal gland predisposition, that we were able to very quickly shape his protocol from appointment 1 and modify it in appointment 2. An iris assessment in clinic should seriously take you no more than about 5 minutes, then maybe another 10 minutes to explain to your client what you're seeing that is important to the situation, and then another 10 or 15 minutes to put the protocol together and teach your client about the protocol and why you're doing it the way you're doing it. It should not take hours. It seriously shouldn't. That is as far as I wanted to take it today. Just wanted to keep it light, keep it quick, and help you to understand that not all iridology courses are created equal. If you want to get a professional level of training, you are going to have to find a teacher who is teaching to that level, not someone who's just giving you cookie cutters and giving everybody the same herbal programs, but someone who will teach you how to use what you know about herbs, or what you know about nutrition, or what you know about flower essences, and how to integrate that with what you're learning from what the eyes are teaching you. Thank you for joining me. Bye for now.